Everybody's out here making designing a brand seem way more complicated than it actually is. It's actually pretty simple. Now you might have people saying,
oh, you need a design degree, or oh, you didn't work in a design agency your whole life.
Well, I personally started my design agency 2 years ago with little to no design experience, no design degree whatsoever, and definitely no cash. And now I'm making 10 times the money I was in my 9 to 5, and I also have the freedom to work from wherever I like. Now, this video isn't saying that you're going to be able to start charging 10, 20 or 50,000 pounds for a branding project, but if you are watching this free course, then I'm assuming that you're in a similar position to me a few years ago with a huge interest in design and no interest in working a 9 to 5. And ideally, you want to get started in the world of design, making about 5k per month. So for those of you nodding your head at the screen right now, this video is going to give you the exact blueprint and all of the information that you need to go away and start charging enough to make design your career. So here's the truth about designing a brand identity in 2025. Most people fail creating designs that resonate with people because they don't create a strategy, they can't justify any of their design decisions, and they wonder why all of their designs then get rejected by clients. But don't worry, we are going to make sure that you do not fall into that category of designers, and I'm going to show you the exact process that me and my designers at Nonstop use to create meaningful brand identities. Now, I hope you didn't click on this video for some basic tutorial, because I'm going to give you my full blueprint from A to Z, how to ideate, create, and deliver brand identities. Because I personally wish that there was a video like this when I was starting out, literally handing me a proven working formula. That would have honestly saved me a ridiculous amount of time, money, and also mistakes, and I really don't want you to go through the same thing. So we're going to go through what a brand identity is, how to onboard the client, creating a strategy, mood boarding, designing the identity, and how to deliver it. So if you're serious to take that dream of drawing for a living and finally make it a reality in 2025, then I can promise you that this is the video that you've been waiting for. So all I've got to say is lock in, get your notepad out, and let's get started. Okay, so branding in its simplest form is perception engineering. Alex Hormozi says that branding is associating your business with a desired outcome. For example, making people link your product to a specific result. Coke is refreshing and Nike equals athletic performance. Marty Noumier, on the other hand, says that branding is a customer's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It's not what you say it is, it's what people believe it is. Now, both are true, because you shape perception through strategic association, which is Alex Hormozi's belief, but ultimately the market decides what your brand means, which is Marty Noumier's belief. So the question is, how do you bridge strategy and perception to build a brand that actually sticks? And this is where my KPS framework comes into play. A brand identity isn't just about how you look, it's about how you show up, what you stand for, and how you make people care. When I've been bringing on designers for my design agency at Nonstop, I teach designers this framework to make branding clear, actionable, and effective. K is know your people. Because branding isn't about you, it's about them. You want to get obsessed with their desires, the frustrations, and also the triggers. If you don't know the audience better than they know themselves, you're simply just guessing. P is pick a promise. A brand without a clear, sharp promise is honestly just noise. Your promise should be specific, bold, and relevant. Something that instantly connects with your audience's desires. Think Tesla's, for example, is accelerate the future. And S is shape it. This is where strategy meets execution. Your visuals, your messaging, and your presence must consistently reinforce your promise, because honestly, inconsistency will just completely kill the trust. So if we bring it all together, Hormozi says that you deliberately create associations with an outcome, and Noumier says your audience internalizes and decides what your brand truly means. Which means that branding isn't a guessing game. It's a strategic play, and this is exactly why strategy is a non-negotiable. So with that being said, let's talk about the deliverables. Here's everything that I provide to a client when building a brand identity. And the first one is a strategy document. This is a 30+ page deep dive that carves out a unique position in the market, ensuring that the brand stands out with clarity and purpose. The second is mood boards or stylescapes. I present 3 distinct visual directions using already existing client work, allowing the client to align with a vision before we dive deep into design. Third is the visual identity. This includes a logo suite, which is multiple logo variations for different use cases, a word mark, which is a clean custom typographic logo, a color palette, which is a strategic color selection for brand consistency, typography selections, we're talking primary and secondary fonts, and then we have the brand assets, which are patterns, icons, or illustrations, and also supporting graphic elements. And then we package this inside of a brand presentation, which is a polished presentation explaining every single design decision, ensuring that the client understands the why behind the new identity. And then once everything's signed off, I create a comprehensive brand guidelines document detailing exactly how to use their brand for consistency across all different touch points. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. That's going to take me ages, and honestly, it does. but you can help streamline your workflow with templates. Now, there's many videos on my page where I walk you through exactly how to create these sort of slide decks from start to finish, but if you would like to purchase my proven framework and literally take the exact templates that I use on a daily basis, you can do using the first link in the description, and if you use the code Jack, that's going to get you 20% off. Okay, so first of all, you need to have your onboarding process nailed. The perceived value of your service is only as good as your onboarding service, meaning they'll likely turn away if you don't have this thought through. Personally, my onboarding process starts with a discovery call. On the call, I ask the client about the problems, walk them through our branding process, and also walk them through the client portal hosted on Notion. After the call, I build out a brand proposal document. To structure this, I'd recommend we starting with an introduction, include any social proof if possible, talk about your edge over other designers. I personally target people who want disruptive branding. If you haven't got any projects, then I would definitely recommend creating some fake ones with today's process. Now, you do want to try and pick 2 case studies that are tailored to the client's needs. If you do have any similar projects, then definitely include these here. I then have 6 customized goals that we will achieve during the project. We then go into the pricing structure. If the client is clear on what they want, then I tend to just present one option. However, if they are unsure and have really big budgets, then throw a few options in there, but make sure that the third option will be worth your time, aka put a big price on there. And then for the last page, I had a tailored note recapping our call and showing my excitement to potentially work with them. From here, the client uses my Notion portal. So first of all, confirm if they'd like to proceed, and then they can go to invoices and pay the deposit using the Stripe link, which leads us nicely into strategy. Now, before we briefly touched on the KPS framework, and now during the strategy, this is where we get to know our people inside out, and we can also pick our promise. Now, it's all good and well doing our own research, but the reality is that your client knows their industry inside and out. So we need to extract as much information from them as possible. And that's where the client questionnaire comes into place. So let's take a look at a real example for a real client of mine called 4Hair. For context, this is a hair care company founded by a barber influencer called Kenneth IV, and he wants to take his influence and monetize it in the form of hair care products. Now, first things first, I always ask who their ideal customer is, and Ken said his target audience are males who care about their hair aged 15 to 25. I further asked him what the characteristics are, and he said that they would be motivated, trendy, and prioritize their appearance. I then asked him, what issues do your hair products solve? And he said a lot of hair care manufacturers create hair care products with unnecessary ingredients that could potentially damage your hair long term. So he wants to create a hair care solution with transparent ingredients. Now, while he's telling me this, I'm starting to think of keywords which we could potentially use for the brand values. Already I'm thinking authentic, transparent, confident. I then go ahead and ask for some URLs of his competitors. This is to get an understanding of why his competition is so successful in the first place. Next, I want to ask the client what's really driven them to create this brand. A good question to ask is, what emotions do you want your brand to evoke in consumers? This links back to Alex Hormozi's idea of branding, which is associating your business with a desired outcome. And Ken said to us, anticipation, trust, admiration, confidence, courage, and reliability. Now, already I'm getting a clear idea of his target audience, which is going to help us with the execution, but there is still some more questions we can ask. I always ask to my clients, if you were to only choose 5 words to describe your brand, what would they be? And he said authentic, creative, passionate, boundless, and culture. And finally, I finish it off by collecting a list of brands that inspire him, so then this gives me a better idea of how we can align our vision with his, and finish it by asking if there are any non-negotiables regarding the branding. Now, I've personally worked on projects before where the client has been so adamant that they want to keep their old logo or a specific colour, or they might even have a preference for a typeface. Now, you've got to judge this on a case-by-case basis to see if it's appropriate, but most of the time, it is. Now, we usually have sufficient information to then build out a strategy, and I've built out a 40-page document which presents it to the client nicely. But essentially, we just cover the following. Taking a look at the contents here, you can see that we introduce the brand with the history behind why it was created, and also what the problem is that they want to solve. We then go on to say the brand mission, we curate this to articulate what the brand does on a daily basis, and then we articulate a vision, which is the broader goal that we aspire to achieve. You'll see next we have unspoken truth, and this is key for me to unlock effective messaging for the brand. I like to think deep into a unique insight that can deeply connect with customers and make them feel like they're a part of a community rather than just purchasing a product. Brand values, we pick 3 that we stand by, allowing us to design with intention. Tone of voice, again 3 characteristics to make sure that our messaging resonates with the desired audience. And then I like to create 3 character personas to confirm who our vision is for. Competition analysis to see what works and where we can have the edge. And finally, how we're going to position ourselves. So let's take a look at what we created for 4Hair based on the client questionnaire. For our brand mission, we said to help young men maintain their youth through style. For our brand vision, we said a world where every young man can embrace and enhance his hair without fear of judgment. For unspoken truth, to resonate with the audience on a deeper level, we uncovered that the care that we put into our hair isn't just about the aesthetics, but it's actually about preserving our youth. And this is going to unlock a self-realization within potential customers, making them realize their daily grooming habits is deeper motivations. Brand values in line with the client's desires. We've gone for authenticity, confidence, and innovation. I've then created 3 profiles of people who will be likely to purchase from them. And then we've analyzed competition. How can we get the edge? Where are they lacking? And what can we take from each brand? Finally, we have tone of voice. We want to be talking directly with confidence to the audience of young motivated males. So we need to be unapologetic. I just want to really quickly interrupt this video and shout out our sponsor Framer. If you've not yet created a professional portfolio with Framer, you are 100% missing out. This is the no-code web building tool that everybody is now using, and it allows people to make crazy animations like this. Again, with no code. Now, if you want to get started today with Framer, Code Jack is going to get you 25% off your first 3 months. Or you can get started today with a free Framer domain. Link in the description. And the next step is to create a mood board so we can successfully align our vision with the client. By mood boarding, I simply mean collecting a bunch of images from sites like Pinterest or Behance, which accurately paint the vision that you have for the direction of the brand. I like to structure this in the format of logo inspiration, type inspiration, color, and packaging for this brand. It's good practice to send over a few different mood boards, but make sure you can still tie in all of the decisions back to the strategy. Now, if you struggle creating different variations, try taking your 3 values, for example, and prioritize 1 per mood board. That would mean for hair, we would have a mood board for authenticity, confidence, and also innovation. But you want to make sure that you can still link all of the values back to the mood board, but try and lean into one of the words that dominate the feel. Spoiler for this client, we went back and forth a few times to get the mood board right, and we eventually landed on the following brief. To create a vibrant identity with bold colour combinations that would stand out on a shelf, whilst also having a professional finish. So to achieve this, we agreed on a large colour palette, a clean sans serif typeface, a flexible brand system to showcase the contrasting colours. This could be interlocking shapes or different gradients. And finally, implement subtle hand illustrated drawings that would scream authenticity. And this now gives us an actionable checklist to go out there, curate the brand in line with the client's vision, which means that there will be very little to no surprises. So which do we tackle first? Well, personally, I like to go for typography. Some of my favourite sites are Adobe Fonts, Google Fonts, and also Envato Elements. Now, once I've spent a couple of hours collating these fonts, I set them up inside of an elimination chamber, which is an Adobe Illustrator file with a bunch of different fonts, and then all I need to do is head to find and replace, change the name to the brand's name, and then the reason it's called the elimination chamber is because we slowly go through each font, eliminating the ones that we don't like until there is simply 1 font left. So here's the font that we picked for this brand. It's called HF Jesco, and I believe it was from Envato Elements. Now, Ken, our client, mentioned before the project how his products would play into the brand name. So we have 4 hairlines, which is a hairline spray. We have 4 curls, which is a curling cream. And then we have the brand name, which is 4 hair. No doubt with the packaging, it's also going to be essential that we have a stacked variation of this word mark. So we're going to take the second word and bring it underneath. Now, it appears that all of the letters have the same width, so we're going to align them for consistency. And a great way to do that is to start by pressing Command and O to convert it to outlines. And then if we press R on the keyboard, we can activate our rulers, which is going to help us align the letters. Well, now we have the word mark, but we still need to complete the logo. Now, over the years, I've experimented with many different ways to create meaningful logos, but the following is yet to fail me. Now, you're going to want to start by mind mapping out all of the words related to the brand. This could be the brand values, words that link to the industry, literally as many words as you can possibly think of on this piece of paper. The more words, the better the exploration. Now, once we've got the words, we can start to visualize these by combining different words together in the form of an icon. And the longer you can spend ideating the logos in this stage, the more likely you are to land on a solid concept. For this project, we picked innovation as one of the words, and we wanted to implement this into an FH monogram. Now, the reason that I do like this concept is because it opens up endless opportunities to create a brand system, revolving completely around abstract shapes, which is going to inspire patterns, containers, and it will also inspire the packaging. To create the logo, I created it inside of Adobe Illustrator by creating a rectangle, converting it into a stroke, head into object, split into grid, and then dividing the square into 100 pieces, each with a spacing of 10 pixels wide. This gives us full control over the spacing. If we press shift and one of the arrows, we know a pixel is going to move 10 spaces to the left. You'll see with the logo we have some arrows at the top, which represent innovation, and the other shapes give us an F and a H for the monogram. Now it's time to introduce some colour. Sites like Coolers are actually really good if you aren't confident with your colour selection, but honestly, we've covered pretty much most of the colours in this colour palette. The reason being that I wanted to give Ken enough options and enough colour combinations to allow him to switch it up on every single release of products. Now, your colour palettes can vary on a case-by-case basis. I've had some brands that just stick to a 3 to 4 colour palette, and others like this one where we've got a wide range of colour selections. So the next step is to test our colour palette for contrast, and a great site to do this is Coolers. All you need to do is go through them 2 pairings at a time and then note down which ones work and which ones don't work. And this is going to be really useful when we create the brand guidelines later on. Now, if you don't do this, clients will undoubtedly use the wrong color pairings, and then it could look bad on you as a designer. So the logo and the colors are now complete, but the brand still feels empty. And this is where we need to bring in appropriate brand assets. Honestly, brand assets are the life and soul of the identity. For her, we took inspiration from the logo, created a bunch of shapes, turned them into patterns, containers, and design elements, and that inspired the packaging, which also had these authentic illustrations on there as well. So this was the hand-drawn illustration icon library, and this is what we mocked up the packaging to look like. Within this mockup, you can also see how we've used the shapes as containers as well. Now, if you're looking for mockups, Mr. Mockup is a good place to find mockups, or you can use Envato elements. This isn't sponsored by either of those. So now with the brand in a presentable manner, we need to showcase it to them, explaining every single design decision, and the brand presentation allows us to do just that. The document's designed to ensure a smooth, impactful brand reveal. It not only shows the new identity, but it also guides the client through every decision, showing the rationale behind the design. The benefit of this is that this is going to build trust, minimize pushbacks, and also reduce unnecessary revisions. So how do we build this thing? Well, we could build this in InDesign, and if you're familiar with the software, then I'd definitely recommend it. However, I'm going to be creating this in Adobe Illustrator since I have all the shortcuts down to a T. So let's get started. First, we're going to set up 30 artboards, 1920 by 1080. So we'll go to File, New, and then change the width to 1920, height to 1080p. Make sure the orientation is on landscape, and we're going to change the amount of artboards to 30. Next, we want to create a grid. So to do that, we need to create a rectangle the same size of our artboard, which is going to be 1920 by 1080. We want to make sure we remove the fill, and then heading over to transform, we want to take away 120 from the top and the bottom. So ideally, we don't want anything to go outside of this range. Now by pressing Command C, Command F, we're going to duplicate this in place. And if we head to Object, Path, Split into Grid, we can create 6 rows with a 30 pixel gutter, Command and G to group those. And with the other rectangle, we can go to Object, Path, Split into Grid, and we can create 12 columns with a 30 pixel gutter. So now if we group these together and press Command C, by clicking on the desired artboard and pressing Command F, we can supposedly paste these in place. But if you don't want to do that, then we can align them to the center and also align them to the middle of the artboard, and we will copy and paste that across to every artboard. There we go, it's working now. We'll add an additional one to the side just in case we need it later on. And now if we select all of our artboards and click Command 5, this is going to convert it into a guide. And by pressing Command semicolon, we can hide these or we can show them. If this is already taking too long and you need a template quick, then you can skip to the time code that's on the screen now, and you can use the code Jack for 20% off the following template. So first of all, we need to add elements that are going to be on every single page. So I'm going to start with my body copy font, which is going to be Satoshi, and we'll stick to 12 points as the font size. I'm going to put the agency name in the top left corner, the top left corner being the top left corner of the grids. I'm going to add our logos to the top right of the document. I'm going to put a slightly larger word mark at the bottom left. And I'm also going to duplicate this text to the bottom right and change that into our page number, which is going to be 01. Let's make sure this is aligning to the right side. As a rule of thumb, to determine my font sizes, I like to start with the smallest font in the document, which in this case is 12 points. And then to determine the rest of them, I simply multiply them by 1.618 each time, which we can do in this box here. And this number is the golden ratio, and if we keep multiplying it by 1.618, we can have a range of font sizes to choose from for our document. There's 2 fonts that I'm going to be using. This is the secondary type. So for the primary type, I'm going to be using a font called Museo Moderno, I believe. Here we go. And then I also want to make sure the color palette's to hand as well. So I'm just going to paste these 3 images here, which we can use for the color palette. And now we can create the cover page. So I think I'm going to change the text to this beige color, and we're going to create a black background for this as the template. So simply increasing it until it goes to 1080 by 1920. If we want to be extra precise, we can change the numbers up here, and then we just make sure to align that to the center. Otherwise, when you export it, you might have a thin white line at the top. And then send this to back, I press Command Shift and open bracket. Using the primary type, I'm going to type brand presentation, and as a guide for spacing, I'm going to create a square this big, and we're going to use that as a guide and bring that here. And we're going to have a subheading as well, which is going to say initial brand identity. Put the date on there as well using the same font sizes. And finally, we add some small text down here as well. So that's looking good. This is now going to be the cover of our page, and it's most likely going to be repeated every time we start a new section. Next, we want an introduction page, and I don't want this to have a black background, so we're going to copy these smaller elements across, and we're going to change these to black. We'll go for the primary color for the second page. And for the text, we're going to put welcome to the Nonstop brand presentation. This presentation is designed to help bring the Nonstop brand to life. Obviously, you didn't put your client's brand name here. I'm going to copy these smaller elements over again. And then using the same font size as the brand presentation, we're going to change this to say contents. This font has different variants, so I need to change these really quick. We're going to keep this aligned in the same place as the front. And as you can see, the first 4 pages recap the strategy. The next 7 pages break down the logo and word mark. The following 5 pages dive into the use of color, followed by 4 pages of type. And finally, the remaining pages are showcasing the brand in action through the use of mockups. So in line with the contents, let's copy over this cover page for the Nonstop brand by simply highlighting the first page, copying it with Command C, and pasting it with Command F. Now we're going to change this slightly to make it more suitable. I'm liking the look of that. The next page, I'm going to copy the introduction over and make it white, but I'm also going to add a small title above it as well. Again, making sure that the text is consistent. We've divided this by 1.618. And the goal is summarizing what we aim to achieve with the brand identity. The next page is going to be summarizing the strategy, which I've narrowed down to 6 headings. If you'd like to read through these, then you can pause the video right now. And for the final page in section 1, I like to reveal a preview of the identity. Now to create this split grid effect, I'll show you how to do that. You want to start by creating a rectangle in the desired space. For this, I have brought the rectangle up to this line here. Next, you want to go to Object, Path, Split into Grid, and we're going to split it into 2 rows and 3 columns. And to make the uneven effect like I just did, then we just go to the Shape Builder tool, which is located over here, and we just drag and drop over where we'd like to merge the cells. And if you sat there wondering how do we create a clipping mask effect using these rectangles, if you wait around to the end, I'll show you all the Streamline ways that you can use this template to your advantage. Now for the cover photos for the rest of them, I know exactly where they're going to place, so I'm just going to copy this style over and I'm going to change them to match the contents. For the word mark, we're going to use this as a base template by copy and pasting it over. And we've changed the title to our word mark, and I've also put an explanation in here. Copying that over again to the next slide. But this time with a bit of a twist, we've removed the white box on the left-hand side, got rid of the text, and instead I've added these arrows which point to the word mark, which will ultimately explain the decision. Now, if you do decide to download this template and you go to Window, Layers, you'll be able to click this toggle right here and see exactly what I've done for a real brand identity client. Using the prior template, we're going to paste it to the next slide, this time adding word mark variations and making sure we include the clear space. And now we're going to repeat the first 2 slides here, but this time we're going to do it for the logo. After these 2, we're going to do a logo in action, which is going to be the same layout as the visual overview, so we're going to copy in that and we're going to paste it down here. And as you can see, I've changed the text here to say logo in action, with also a brief summary as well. Okay, so we're officially halfway. Hopefully you're still awake because now we're about to build the color slides, which is slightly different. Okay, so for the color section, it really depends on how many colors we've got in our color palette, but I'm going to use this as an initial guide. Okay, so this is what we've come up with, and I've used the split into grid for this. So it was initially this one big rectangle like this. And by going to Object, Path, Split into Grid, I divided it into multiple rows and 3 columns, and then using the Shape Builder tool, I merged some of them together to create this nice effect. Now the space in between these elements here is simply by creating a rectangle and dragging it in between our guide, which tended to be about 30 pixels wide, which makes sense because that's what we did for the gutter. And I've made sure to maintain that in between the bottom of the text and the bottom of the rectangle. I've made sure to include the hex code, the RGB, and the CMYK. Now I've got a bit of text on the left just to explain the choices behind the colour. However, if your brand has packaging, then you're going to need one of these, a Pantone colour. So this page is simply just to get a Pantone matching as close to the colour palette that you've selected. And the page after is just to show it in action with any mockups you might have already created. Wrapping things up, we want a packaging in action. So we're going to copy over the logo in action page and just change the title. And if you do download my template, you'll see that the descriptions are set up, ready for you to just simply change out the brackets. Okay, so jumping into the type, it depends on how many types you've actually got involved in your brand identity. For me, I've just got the 2, so let's create a quick template for this. So here you can see we've got primary type and explain it on the left. And then we've got the primary typeface, which is Moderno Museo. And for the secondary font, we have Satoshi. So we're going to copy this across and simply just change the font types. If you stick around to the end, I'll show you exactly how you can change this in just a few clicks. And to wrap off the type, I also like to include a type in use. So I'm going to head over to my digital use template. And this is a template that I'll be releasing in the next couple of weeks. It's got loads of different social media examples, which you can simply just use a clipping mask behind there. Change anything necessary. This took absolutely ages to create. So let me know if you would like this template. And I'm happy with that as our template. And this is what it's turned out like. This is a real life example from a real brand identity project, so you can see exactly how it could be used. And if you do download the template, you'll also have access to this entire PDF. And now to wrap this off, we're just going to split this into a 4 image grid, and we're going to copy and paste that across the remaining 5 slides, which is simply going to be the brand in action. If we take a look at the real presentation for the client, we can see that this is filled with many different mockups. So this is the final template that's going to be available on my website. Now I'm going to show you some shortcuts to use to save you time when editing it. So the first one we've already mentioned, which is Command semicolon to view or hide guides. But what if we want to change the primary font? Now, instead of going through each slide, we can simply head over to Type, find and replace font. And you can see we've got a list of the fonts used here. We know our primary font is Museo Moderno, and we can change this if we would like to Helvetica Bold. We make sure to change the Museo Moderno Bold as well. Change that to Helvetica. And as you can see, all of the fonts have changed just like that in a click of a button. Okay, so the next issue that we might face is having to update the colors of the document every single time. Now there's a way to speed this up, and what I like to do is highlight the entire document, go to Help and type in Recolor, click Recolor Artwork, and now if we change these to be the exact colors, we can simply put our desired hex codes in here, or alternatively, we can change them across the scale. Another issue we could run into is that on our document, we could run into the risk of putting a different client's name on our document, especially if we're constantly updating the same document to match a new brand identity. So a way that you can avoid this is by simply going to Edit, Find and Replace, and if we type in the text that we'd like to replace and click Find, it's going to find it across all of the different touch points, and we can simply change them all at once by typing in Replace With and click Replace All. As you can see, 8 changes were made. And finally, it's all well and good having these boxes here. However, how do we create them into a clipping mask? And the quickest way to do this is by simply bringing our picture into Adobe Illustrator, reducing the size to make sure it covers the space of the rectangle, and now send this to the back by clicking Command Open Bracket, Command Shift Open Bracket. Make sure it's selected, hold Shift and click the area that you'd like to create a clipping mask with, and click Command and 7. Now we just delete the text, and there we go. Now I personally prefer to present this on a call to a client, and once they've signed it off, I then build out the brand guidelines. The brand presentation is what we present to the clients to get our designs signed off, and the brand guidelines is showing the client how to use their new identity. Now before we start, I'm going to quickly show you my new brand guidelines template. You'll be able to find this in the link in the description, and if you can't be bothered to build one yourself, feel free to buy this with the code JACK, and that will get you 20% off your order. So as you can see, really detailed brand guidelines, split it into 10 sections. We've got introduction, story, strategy, verbal identity, visual identity, the word mark and icon, color, typography, brand assets, and brand in action. Let's create one from scratch. Now we're going to select new on Adobe Illustrator. Feel free to design this in InDesign. I know I should be designing it in InDesign, but being completely honest, I've never learned it and I've always stuck to Adobe Illustrator, and they look absolutely fine like this. The only problem you may have is that these file sizes might be too big and they might crash your computer if you have a poorer performing laptop. With that being said, we're going to start by creating 54 artboards because that's how many I've decided to make in the brand guidelines. We're going to set the orientation to landscape, and we're going to change the width to 1920. So if you watched my videos before, you'll know that the way that I determine my font sizes in my documents is by starting with the smallest font size and working my way up using the golden ratio. So we're going to start here by choosing the font Poppins, which is one of my brand fonts. And I do like to start at 12 pixels and use this for the macro text elements, like at the bottom where I'm showing my email and other parts. And then to determine the other sizes, we're just going to duplicate it by holding Option and Shift. And then heading over to the 12 points, we're going to multiply it by 1.618. And then we're going to repeat this process to create our other text sizes. Okay, so we've got our text sizes. I'm just going to bring those over to the left. Now, by this point, you should have your brand elements already completed. So this is your logo, typography, brand assets. If you want to see how to create a brand identity from start to finish, I posted a video last week, so I'd recommend you watch that first, along with how to create a brand strategy and also how to create a brand presentation. And now to determine the margin, we're going to do 1920 divided by 25, which is 76.8. So now if we create a square of 76.8, and we'll just quickly put a white border on there so we can see it. And now if we put that in the top left and also the top right, and then if we draw a rectangle, this is going to be our margin. We can use this calculation throughout, so if we've got smaller elements later on, for example this, and we need a margin for this, then we can simply measure the width, which is going to be 425, and then we do 425 divided by 25, which is 17.4, And then we know the margin of this will be 17.4. So we draw a 17.4 square here, place it in the top left corner, and then we duplicate it in the top right corner. And then every time this can determine our margin. So we need to keep all of the text and all of the assets in line with this. That's just a really quick and easy way to make it look neat and have consistent spacing across all of your designs. So with that being said, let's bring in the micro text assets first using the font size 12, and we'll also change the background color to our orange. There we go. So we have our branding agency in the top left. We have our name, agency, prepared for the client and their business name. And then again, branding agency name. You can put whatever you like here. At the bottom right, I like to add a date usually. And then we'll also put our horizontal word mark at the bottom left as well. Bring in some text, again making sure our text is selected by one of these sizes. If it needs to be larger, then again we'll multiply it by 1.618. And finally we'll add a bit of a personal touch, so whatever your brand assets you might have created may be, add a little bit of personality to the cover. So I'm going to bring an illustration here from my branding agency Nonstop. And there we go, we've got our front cover. The second page, I always like to create a contents page so the reader knows exactly what's coming up and also where they need to go to if they're specifically looking for, let's say, brand assets or the typography selections. So throughout the designs, I like to copy these over by selecting them by holding Shift and then copying them with Control C and pasting them on the artboard with Control F. Now there is a way to copy it to all of the artboards, however it sometimes doesn't work. Now it's this command here, which is Option, Shift, Command and V. So we'll try it. Option, Shift, Command and V. Oh, and it's worked. So there we go. That's an even quicker way, and as you can see, it's pasted across absolutely every single artboard, which saves us tons of time. First, we have an introduction, just telling people what this booklet actually consists of. Our story, who we are and what we do. Our mission and vision, which is dragged from the brand strategy document, which we will have created prior to this. We brief the reader on our strategy, so our positioning in the market. Our design approach, which has led to our design choices, essentially. Our brand values. And then we have the verbal identity, which heavily leans into the brand values, where we pick 3 characteristics, which we use as our tone of voice. And then we like to break them down in individual pages, which show us examples in the real world and across touch points of how we should sound when somebody interacts with us for the first time. And then we start to break down the visual identity, showing a brief overview, how it all looks together. And then we start to jump into the rules with the word mark and the icon, the clear space, the co-branding, how we shouldn't use the word mark, what the word mark looks like in action, any clear space that's required, how to not use our logo, and again, showing our logo in action. After that, we break down the color palettes, what color pairings are allowed and which ones aren't, what Pantones we should use, how the color packaging looks in action, and also how the color is used across different platforms. In the 8th section, we break down typography. We talk about the primary typeface, why we chose it. We then show the correct tracking, coding, and leading. We repeat this for the secondary typeface and potentially a third typeface if there is one. And then I like to show how the type is used in the real world. Coming to the end, we have the brand assets, so you'll see examples on this where we have the illustration library. Showcase the brand pattern, which I'd recommend you create a pattern for every brand that you make. And finally, we showcase the brand in action, so designers or external marketers can see how this is meant to look in the real world. So if we take a look at the orange highlighted headings here, we're going to create a cover page like the front one for each of the pages, so we know what number these are going to be. We're going to copy and paste these across now to the different artboards, and I'll show you when we've done. There we go. That took longer than I thought. We've got all the covers in place here. As you can see, this takes a long time to create these templates, so I would advise you just buying mine. It helps me out. But no, honestly, it takes so long to make these, and for the sake of £50, you're going to get your money's back in return of investment when you deliver this to your clients. Also, if you go to layers here, you will see an example one here for a real client. Look how nice that looks. Super professional, super clean. All of the spacing is beautiful. Yeah, we're going to go through it anyway. So we're going to start from left to right. Let's start with introduction. Introduction, this is the Nonstop Brand Identity Style Guide. It tells you who we are, what we stand for, how we talk, and how we look. An example for the Nonstop agency, which is my branding agency, is since day one, Nonstop has been about breaking the rules so you can make the rules. We create brands that go against the run of play because in a world full of boring identities, standing out isn't optional. Make design fun again. Make it creative. There's so many rules in place now that people just feel like they can't experiment with nice designs. Anyway, enough ranting going on. Let's check out the next slide. We have the mission and vision. Now, I like to pull these straight from the strategy. If you've not already seen the strategy video on this page, definitely go and check that out because they go into detail. I usually create a document similar to this, 40 plus pages at the start of an identity project, really digging into who the business wants to be and how they want to be perceived. We go through everything from mission, vision, values, and this is just a bit of a summary at the end showing people the highlights of the brand strategy. Now, if you don't know what a mission is, it's pretty much our day-to-day what we do to craft bold, rule-breaking brands that tell your story and make you impossible to ignore. The reason why you don't want these to be fluffed up corporate language, because when somebody reads your mission, you really want it to resonate with someone. If this said to create a brand identity that's truly rooted in your brand's essence, that means nothing to everyone. Whereas this, to craft bold, rule-breaking brands that tell your story and make you impossible to ignore, that's speaking to somebody who's sick of these boring designs. Maybe they're in a boring industry. I say boring industry, an industry of boring identities, and they want to stand out and they know the importance of design. This is going to stand out to them. And then we look at our vision, which is our broader goal. That's what we want to aim for in the long run. I always like to position this as how we want to inspire others. So the non-stop vision is to inspire a new wave of authentic creativity where businesses express themselves through fearless, rule-breaking design. Moving into the strategy, we start with the positioning. In summary, how we want to position ourselves in the market. So for non-stop, we are here for the businesses that dare to be different, the ones who refuse to blend into the sea of sameness. And then using a smaller text size down here, again, stemming from these font sizes on the left, talking about how our approach is different and also where we're based in Manchester. We've got that northern grit, no nonsense attitude to everything that we do, no fluff, no gimmicks, just proper fearless branding that gets results. Design approach, this is essentially the design direction that we agreed at the start of the brand identity. And this should be showing that we have achieved what we said we were going to do. So for the non-stop identity, it's all about standing out, no messing around. We've got the bright electric orange, filled with energy, impossible to ignore. In the text further down, we talk about how we've paired this bright orange, vibrant identity with these napkin style illustrations to really lean into where the best ideas start, that raw, authentic, scruffy sketching at the start of a project. And touching on that, we move into our brand values, which agree with the direction of the branding, which is bold, authentic, and daring. And they tie in nicely with the verbal identity, where I like to pick a tone of voice based on these brand values. So for example, our tone of voice is direct, bold, but also approachable. And to clarify things for people who might be working on our business, let's say it's marketers or alternatively motion graphic designers or even other designers that we hire for projects, we really need to clarify what this tone of voice truly means. And the best way to do this is by breaking it down with some examples. So starting off with direct, we believe in keeping things clear and straight to the point. We make sure that people know we can be confident, but also not arrogant. We can be bold, but not brash. We can be straightforward, but not dismissive. On the left side, we have 4 different examples, 2 right and 2 wrong. So examples, we build bold brands that demand attention. We sound direct and confident. Don't say our bespoke branding solutions may help differentiate your business, because we sound too formal and uninspiring. And again, with another example, your brand should stop people in their tracks, rather than we aim to provide high quality branding that meets clients' needs. You'll notice by now that I really like to cut through this fluffed up corporate language because I just think it means nothing. I used to work as an accountant and I used to read these emails all the time that just had too many words in, and I'm reading through it looking to see what are they trying to actually tell me here. And it's so hard, so I'm all about being direct, which is why my design agency also holds these values. We've got 2 more examples here, which you can pause right now if you want to read the bold, and you can also pause this if you'd like to read the daring one. And now we're moving into the fun part, which you might all have been waiting for, the visual identity. For the rest of this template, I've not shown examples for non-stop. I've made it so you can easily edit it yourself. However, we will go through the open mouth examples at the end. So as you can see here, we've got a visual overview. I like to put in the logo, the word mark, and also the branding action in a few different images. If you were to bring in your own images, let me show you how you can do that quickly. Bring in this picture from my talk in June. We use this as an example. Now, if you want to use clipping masks in Illustrator, if you're not so familiar, you just need to send the photo to the back by holding Command Shift open bracket, hold Shift, click on the square, and click Command and 7. And that is going to use it as a clipping mask. Now you can start to see how easy this template really is to edit. There's a few other shortcuts as well I'll show you at the end, which make editing this a complete breeze. So once we've shown the visual overview, we move into the word mark and icon. Starting with the word mark, I like to include the variants here. So we have the horizontal and also the vertical. On the left, I like to describe why we made the word mark. This is a page that will be included in the brand presentation. So if you've already created this, you can simply copy and paste it over to the brand guidelines. A page that isn't in the brand presentation though is clear space. Now taking a look at the clear space here, there are no set rules as to how to create clear space, but one that I really do like to use is try and use an element of the icon. You can also, and I'll show you this in the example for open mouth, split it into the width is X and the clear space should be a quarter, maybe a half of X. But I like to use an element of the word mark. So you can see we've used the N here as the width of N to create the spacing. And now this means that whenever you do use this word mark, you want to try and avoid putting anything within this space to make sure that the word mark remains legible. After the clear space, we've got co-branding, so how our word mark should look when we're connecting with other brands. Now, you might not necessarily need this, but I like to add it because a lot of the businesses that I work with might include Stripe or, for example, with my brand, Framer and Adobe. And then afterwards, we also show how not to use the word mark. Let's take a look at how this might look for open mouth, where we have actually done this. As you can see, we've got some examples here for the open mouth misuse of word mark. It's just informing designers what not to do with the word mark. For example, don't change the word mark composition, maybe don't add a stroke, don't rotate it, don't use a color outside the color palette, don't add a border, don't outline the word mark, don't add a drop shadow, or maybe don't use multiple colors at once. So now that the reader knows what not to do with the word mark, I like to show how the word mark looks in action, which is here where we've just got an image covering the entire page. So now we've covered everything word mark related, we need to dive into our logo. And again, this is taken from the brand presentation. It's almost a repeat of what we've just done for the word mark, but now we repeat this for the logo as well. As you can see, we're still using this element from the JW word mark here, which is used for creating a clear space. And then finally, we go into the misuse of logo. For the open mouth identity, we had don't stretch the logo, do not replace the O in the word mark with our logo, don't rotate the logo, do not color the logo in a secondary color, do not change the color of the illustrated logo, do not add a gradient to the logo, do not add a drop shadow to the logo, do not add a stroke, or do not add a 3D effect to the logo. Again, case by case basis, this changed depending on how you want your designs to be perceived by its audience. After that, again, we have an image showing the logo in action. For the open mouth one, we did this by showcasing how the logo would look on an apron. And now we can jump into the color. So I always like to start it with the page that we created in the brand presentation, which is just breaking down our color selection and also hex codes, RGB, CMYK, and also we'll be describing why we selected this color palette in the first place. For the open mouth one, as you can see, we have our primary colors at the top, and then we also have a line of secondary colors at the bottom. After the color selections, we have the color pairings. This is a really quick way of showing what colors work together. And then we've got a page talking about what Pantone we should be using for our brand. If you're not familiar with Pantones, let me show you. Now, I was stupid enough to fall for the Supreme drop and get the Supreme edition for a ridiculous amount more. To be honest, I'm not sure how much more they were, but they're just really cool. And what I like to do is get the color up on my screen. For example, we've got this non-stop orange here. Pull out our Pantones, which mine have little Supreme imprints on, which look really cool, and pick the color which is closest to our digital color. And once we have that, we can write this on here. Next, we show the Pantones in use with color packaging, and then I like to show 3 images wrapping up the color in action. So as you can see, we're starting to build that story from start to finish, guiding people through the right and wrong on how to use our brand. And we're towards the end now, we're 8 out of 10 done. So we're gonna go into typography choices where we break down the primary and secondary fonts. So we've got the primary type here, which is pulled from our brand presentation. We've gone with the font Owners X Narrow. On the left, I like to describe why we've chose that font. And then the page after, I believe this to be one of the most important pages on the document, the tracking, kerning, and leading. Now, as you can see, just by simply looking at these 3 different columns, it makes such a difference how our typography is used. When it's too tight, it can look like this, and when it's too loose, it can look like the M1. So it's really important that we make very, very clear how we want our text to look. And that's why we've got examples here showing the tracking and also the leading. A rule of thumb that I commonly go for when determining the tracking and also the leading, when it's bigger titles like this, I tend to keep the leading at a 1:1 ratio. And when we've got smaller subheadings, I tend to multiply it by 1.2. So you see here, we have a font size of 22. That means the leading 22 times 1.2, which is 26. And then we just repeat these 2 slides for the secondary type. As you can see, we've got Poppins as the secondary font. I love using Poppins. It just looks really clean, you can't go wrong with it. And then again, we show how Poppins looks whenever we use that as a heading. And then after this, I like to show the typing used with some social media examples. I pulled this template from my digital use template, which you'll be able to find in my store as well if you do go and check out the link in the description. We've got Ballo Grayson as our primary type. We have Poppins as the secondary type. And then showcasing the type in use. It clearly shows how we've got Poppin, all caps, 30 kerning. In this example, we've got Ballo Grayson plus 10 kerning. And for our word mark, it also shows how we use Ballo Grayson. So finally, before we show the brand in action, I'm going to show you how we create an illustration library. So this is the non-stop illustration library. As you can see, I've split it into 3. We've got hand illustrations, people illustrations, and other illustrations. I've actually got these the wrong way around. And then after this, I like to show the brand pattern that we've created as well, which looks like this in our case. So that is pretty much the entire brand guidelines. Afterwards, I like to show different mock-ups, showcased in the end, but we'll take a quick look now at what a real life example looks like. Okay, so before we look at the open mouth guidelines, I'm going to show you really quickly some shortcuts how you can edit this template with speed. And the first one is that you might be thinking it's going to be a complete nightmare if you've got a different color palette and a different selection of fonts to go through and one by one change these. But if you go to type, find and replace font, click on the font you want to replace, and then head to replace font with system, you can simply go down, select the font that you'd like to replace it with, click change all, and as you can see, this changes all of the fonts at once. Next, if you want to edit the color palette with speed, all you need to do is select your artboard, go to edit, edit colors, recolor artwork, and this is going to bring up every color in the document, which you can just change the values to exact, and presumably you'll have your hex codes to hand, which you can just type in the bottom right here, change your colors, and that's going to change it across the entire guidelines. So just before we finish, a quick look at how this might look for a real client that you're working on. Again, we've edited the story, brought in the strategy from the strategy document that we've created. We've showcased the logo, showcased the clear space. We've done the same for the word mark as well. When it comes to the color pairings, we've explained everything, showcased the typography choices, how this should look in action, examples of the type in use, and finally the illustration library that we've created along with this really unique brand pattern. So hopefully you found some value out of this video. I would definitely recommend, if you're at the start of an identity project, to first watch the brand strategy video, followed by the brand presentation video, and then also watch my building a brand identity in one day video, which is going to take you from start to finish. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week where we'll be creating a brand identity from start to finish.